Basic education is the foundation upon which other levels of education are built. It is a necessary requirement for human and national progress. It is fundamental to human and national development. It is then crucial to plan for how funds are raised and spent to achieve the objectives of the education subsector.
This report examines budget allocations in Nigeria, with a special focus on the Federal Capital Territory to the basic education subsector and the dangers underfunding as well as corrupt practices pose to the basic education in the territory. It is pertinent to mention here that the Federal Capital Territory is comprised of 6 area councils, namely Abuja Municipal, Kwali, Abaji, Kuje, Gwagwalada, and Buari.
Nigeria runs a federal system of government. Hence, the Nigerian education system is overseen by the Federal Ministry of Education in partnership with state and local governments. The education system at the federal level is managed by the Federal Ministry of Education. This includes partial financing of state public basic schools, which are controlled by governments at the state level. Basic education is the local and state government's responsibility with federal government support through the Universal Basic Education Commission (UBEC).
The National Personnel Audit data of the Universal Basic Education Commission shows that there are 596 public primary schools in the Federal Capital Territory and 164 public junior secondary schools across the nation's capital. The National Bureau of Statistics further stated that 57 mixed public senior secondary schools were in Abuja as of 2016, and this increased to 62 the following year.
In 2018, a survey conducted by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, indicates that the population of out-of-school children in Nigeria had risen from 10.5 million to 13.2 million, the highest in the world. Most of these children are in Nigeria's northern states of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa, where Boko Haram insecurities have disrupted academic activities. Nigeria's federal capital is a planned modern city with magnificent buildings, a vibrant and energetic population, and bustling businesses that generate humongous amounts of wealth. One would think this promising metropolis would be immune to many of Nigeria's perennial problems, especially when it comes to basic education. But the 2018 National Personnel Audit of the Universal Basic Education revealed that there are 48,294 out-of-school boys in the Federal Capital Territory and 4,678 girls out of school as of December 2018.
President Muhammadu Buhari presented a budget to Nigeria's National Assembly, proposing to spend just over 16 trillion naira for the year 2022. Of that amount, education would receive a little over 1 trillion naira. This amounts to 7.9% of the national budget, a fraction that, though much improved from previous years, still remains below the 26% recommended by UNESCO. An analysis of the 2022 budget proposal shows that 108 billion naira of Universal Basic Education Commission meant for coordinating education at the primary and junior secondary levels is an improvement from the 77.6 billion naira appropriated in the year 2021. That year, Nigeria budgeted 6.3% of its national budget on the Federal Ministry of Education, including monies allocated to UBEC. Still, Nigeria's education problems persist, including in its federal capital.
We took a close look at the budgetary allocation to education in the FCT between 2007 and 2016 and found that out of a total sum of 2,167,638,645,177 spent over 9 years by the local administration, only 280 billion 529 million 680,147, representing 12.9% of the federal allocation to the Federal Capital Territory, was allocated to education during the period under review. Despite the fluctuating allocation of funds to the Nigerian basic education subsector, billions are yet to be accessed by most governments of the country's 36 states. In addition to this, billions more allocated to address training of teachers and improving infrastructure are also not accessed due to the inability of the state governments to show evidence of proper utilization of the UBEC funds for the previous years as required by law. Policy analyst with the Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All, Otinakachi Ahanonumbama, speaks on budgetary allocation to the Nigerian basic education sector.
Basic education is something that every country that really wants to achieve a robust development need to put their time, their energy and invest, because that is the beginning of formation of every human being. Unfortunately, Nigeria is playing lip service with the future of this country, which is not accepted. Now, for Nigeria to truly enjoy a robust and quality education that will lead to national development, anything short of UNESCO recommendation as amplified in the Abidjan principle is not acceptable. They are projecting 15 to 20% of the total budget of the country to be allocated to basic education. Because if we're able to get the foundation right, we'll be able to achieve education 2030. And looking at Sakefa content, where we advocate for ensuring that every Nigerian child, irrespective of your gender, your ethnicity, has access to free, safe, inclusive education. So this budget allocation is very, very key. That if government really wants to be truthful and do the right thing, they should adhere to that principle of increasing the budget of basic education from 15 to 20%.
Looking at major development challenges in the Nigerian basic education system, corruption has contributed massively to the fallen standard of basic education. It negatively affects access to schools, quality of education, inclusion, and learning outcomes in the basic education subsector, with devastating consequences on infrastructure, manpower, wash facilities, and other facilities in the schools. The effects are huge on the opportunities young Nigerian children will have in the future.
Corruption in education represents a major violation of the right to education of the children, and it remains a significant barrier which impedes generations of children from realizing their potential. Basic education systems are particularly vulnerable to corruption, following the fact that the systems handle large funding volumes, which is expected to be 23% of national budgets.
Poor accountability and weak capacity are inhibitors of corrupt practices in the implementation of the budget. As a result of this, vulnerable children are forced to drop out of school following their inability to pay hidden costs and other unauthorized fees, which primary and secondary schools say they have no choice but to charge. The Sakefa official, Odinaka, further speaks on the impact of corruption on the basic education subsector.
Making public school, especially at the basic level, very, very attractive is very simple. We have the resources. We have what it takes to make sure that our children are being protected. But because of corruption, wickedness, greed, nonchalant attitude of it is not my own, my child is not there, whatever that happens to those children is not my business. That is what is keeping us here. How much does it cost to do a perimeter fence? If an allocation like for UBEC funding, states supposed to put in their own counterpart fund before UBEC put their money. Unfortunately, what most states are doing, immediately they put their own 5% counterpart fund in the account, and UBEC brought their own. They take the whole money, and nobody will account for it. Nobody will sanction them until when that state governor leaves the office. It doesn't make sense. You must account for the money you are giving to make sure that all these infrastructures, building fences, making sure that these children have toilets, making sure that there is enough wash facilities in the school. It has been budgeted, and this money has been given to you. So even if all is not given to you, can you account for the little that was given to you? But no, in our own case, these people will sit down, eat the cow, eat the aboki, and also eat the rope, and nobody is talking. It is so alarming. If there's going to be a law that states that if so amount is given to you for education, if you default, this is what is going to happen to you instantly. Because you know, every other sector is embedded in education. If we get the education system in Nigeria right, I put it to you that every other system will be fine.
Reports from Transparency International buttress that 66% of the money Nigerian governments allocate to education is stolen by corrupt officials. In its report titled Corruption in Education Systems in West Africa, the group described corruption as a commonplace in education systems within the sub-region, with Nigeria, the most populous West African country, not an exemption. The report highlighted resource misallocation, corrupt procurement, teacher absenteeism, and corrupt recruitment practices, and many others, as the various corruption risks and challenges facing education systems in most countries.
Since the early 90s, Nigeria got it wrong on investing in basic education. Yes, we have the Universal Basic Education Act that stipulates funding, dedicated first-line charge funding, that also provide this funding to states with counterpart funding to access and invest in infrastructure, in hiring teachers, and ensuring that basic education is at its best across Nigeria. So today, when you look at the 36 states and the FCT, some states are doing well in providing counterpart funding and accessing these resources. The fact that I say they're doing well in accessing it does not mean they're doing well in utilizing it. Because I know that, for instance, Adamawa State is now accessing 2020-2021 and implementing their action plan using these resources. But interestingly, when you take a trip, just 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometer trip away from the capital, what you see is dilapidated building. Sometimes this building, there are no roof, no access to wash facilities, so no toilets, no water. So what it means is if there's a girl going to that school, anytime she's on her menses, she would lose 3 to 6 days important class. So for me, my assessment is basic education is not doing well. Today, that's why you have parents not even sending their kids or their wards to public primary school. When you look at data, states are accessing this money, but when you go on the ground, the releases is not commiserable to what you find on the ground. For me, 1, corruption is a big part of what is responsible. 2 is the fact that nobody is looking at the implication of the fact that we're not investing in Nigeria's future. Because so today, I can speak to you because there was a deliberate investment in my basic education. Because for everybody who is successful, it means the foundation was solid. And basic education is the foundation of every child. So the leaders that we have today do not see investing deliberately in basic education as the future of Nigeria. Because if we don't get it right with basic education, the child would not be able to assimilate knowledge in secondary and in university. So it is just sad and unfortunate that we have crops of leaders that don't see basic education as a priority and as an investment for our future. So the case of the FCT is interesting because the budget of the FCT is passed by the Senate. It is only the FCT that does not have a legislative arm or an independent legislative arm. The 36 states have the State House of Assembly, but the FCT's case, it is the Senate that provides oversight or approves their budget, and then the FCTA implements this budget. That alone is a gap because it does not provide a framework for legal and regulatory and any form of transparency and accountability. So that's why today you hardly find publicly available information about appropriation and releases of intervention or basic amenities in the FCT. And it took the Minister of FCT a longer period to even appoint secretaries because, again, the FCT has a minister that represents us. But in an ideal situation, we're supposed to have a mayor. In every other country, cities like the FCT has a mayor. Because what happens is you can hold the mayor to account because there's an election that brings him into office. But the FCT minister, nobody can hold him to account because he's only answerable to Mr. President. Because he's an appointee that sits on the Federal Executive Council empowered by the President. So it is a dilemma for people like us that work in the FCT and engage the administrators here in the FCT. So when you have an executive who literally no oversight is performed on, so ideally, democracy, you have separation of power. But in this case, this person is super powerful and influential with so much executive power, with little or no oversight. And when the media or the civil society try to even ask questions, then they hit brick wall. I've written a series of freedom of information letter to the FCTA administration, asking them what is the state of the project they've implemented. I remember one time I wrote and I said, can I get a detailed report of what they have done with budgeted allocation? Till this moment, nobody responded to my letter. I even went on radio to talk about it. So I called them out. Nothing happened.
How many years?
Oh, this is just about 6 years of this intervention. And I've done specific freedom of information requests, and I've also done advocacy. I know I wrote a letter saying, okay, I want to pay a courtesy call to the FCTA and sit and even understand and ask questions and also introduce my organization and myself. Nobody responded to it. So the case of the FCTA is a case of impunity, where they have so much power and influence and leverage, and they don't give a damn, if you allow me to use that word. They don't give a damn because there are no consequences. And I think I need to stress this. Education is a fundamental human right. It is covered in the Constitution that education for every child is a right. So either you're poor or you're rich, government is meant to ensure that you get educated. And then Nigeria is a signatory to the Sustainable Development Goal, and Goal 4 talks about access to timely, quality education for every child. So for me, the implication is that we are trampling on this rights of these kids, but most importantly, we're sending the wrong message, generally saying, if you're not wealthy, if you're not rich, and you're not, your parents or your network is not around power, it means you cannot enjoy your own rights or a basic necessity that government is meant to provide.
AD4 TV Radio, in its series of investigations into the accountability reports on schools in the FCT, will unearth such issues and many others similar to fees racketeering in the interest of probity, transparency, accountability, and due process in the generation and expenditure of resources by public officials in the basic education subsector of the Federal Capital Territory. We will also reveal how a culture of corruption has over the years eroded the delivery of education as a basic right to such an extent that infrastructure, access, personnel, and even the safety and security of Nigerian children have been compromised.